Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Wednesday. It's August 17th, and this will be our chart lesson for the day. And as usual, I want to start out showing you the daily chart. You can see we're still severely overbought up here. We're still, we're maybe right inside the brown upper band now in the envelope. We're really close to that trend line if that's going to be our target, and we're going to turn down. Um, this was a really bearish day at one point, and we recovered some of it. I still wouldn't be surprised to see a little more correction here, even if we are going to go a little higher. Um, we'll just have to see. But it's just kind of, this is kind of it would have been nice to just see it run on up and touch that trend line and turn down if that's what it's going to do. But we're still not there yet. If that's definitely going to be our target. So we've got some more mixed trading and maybe some more upside movement, and we could see some more volatility here. So we'll just have to let this play on out and see what happens. Um, but yeah, mostly a bearish day today. We did close way off the lows, but definitely a bearish day today. So let's flip over to the intraday chart, the 2000 tick chart, go through our trades, and we'll wrap this day up. Okay, as you can see, most of the movement came during the overnight. No, that's what's been happening lately, and then we were just chopping sideways. We did have a little break, failed break lower, and you can see if you do a measured move, we didn't quite get a measured move there. We came up a tad short, but we did have a failed break lower. We reversed, had a nice trend up. The blue area here was one of the news items. At 1 o'clock, we had a FOMC meeting minutes released today. This is not quite the same as the FOMC rate hike. This one's not going to usually be nearly as volatile, although there was some volatility today. So maybe something came out in those minutes. I don't know. I haven't even looked. Don't really care. We just know that you need to be flat going into this, most likely. Uh, Normally we're an hour on a FOMC rate hike day. We want to be flat an hour ahead of time. This one I would say 30 minutes, so you could take a trade up to about 30 minutes, and then I'd probably be flat because you can see you could have got chopped up pretty quickly here. We did take this one back almost immediately. And that's usually what happens on a big news item. You see it went haywire, moved up, and then within a few minutes, we'd come back right to where we kind of started from when the news came out. So, and that's pretty typical. We did continue to push up for two more legs. Actually, you could call that three more legs. And then we had two legs down and just kind of got back inside the trading range and stayed in there for the rest of the we have, since we opened up on the new day, we are trading down again. Maybe we get that measured leg down from here now. We'll see. You might even want to measure from over here from where the high was. So let's just assume we get one from there. What would our target be to the downside before we might bounce? 42.35 or so. You're looking at 30, 35 points, maybe something like that. I'm just doing the quick math off the top of my head. If you want to figure it out, looks like about 30 points though. Anyway, there it is. And again, the blue area, well, I don't mark any trades in there. You need to be flat. We just kind of skip that until it kind of straightens back out. And by the time it gets in about 15 minutes, we're probably back to kind of normal here. It's still affecting the trend to the upside, but the price action is not so volatile, and we've already taken back the news move, and we kind of reset, and then the market works over again from there. And that's really typical for when you get these news movements like this and it runs up real fast, for it to take most of that back pretty quickly and just kind of what I call a reset. It comes back to where it started and the market starts over from there and kind of moves on for the day. But let's zoom in here, go through the trades, and wrap this day up. And you can see we had the big downtrend. We had a little overshoot here, which usually tells you we're probably going to get a break pretty soon, which the break came. I don't know if I'd call that consistent, good enough to be called a convincing close outside. So notice we finally got a close outside here and work lower. It's just a first entry. There was a second entry here, but it's right into the lows. It's a big engulfing bar, and you see how weird the bar looks. Just sit tight. And if you just wait a few minutes, you get a nice second entry short here with a big bearish bar. And you could have traded this on the engulfing bar or going short here. There's plenty of room down to the lows. Either way you do it. And that's pretty bearish. And it is a second entry short. Notice the new low. First entry and then a second entry. And it's, you might even argue there's a triple test there. It's a little close, but you draw your line across here, you can pretty much see it's, you could argue that to be a triple test. And this is a lower high than this one. So we tried to go up once, twice, 3 times. So anyway, quick, easy move, no big runners or anything. And then we kind of just chopped along here. This is just more congestion. I don't see anything I like entering in there. And we finally push higher. And notice you get a little double bottom here, and you try to go short once, and then twice it bounces right off the EMA. You don't necessarily look for failures and second entries in here, but that does confirm the trend line. And if we break higher there, we're probably going to run on up and probably test these next highs here. And as long as you got enough room, maybe you take that trade. It is a little congested. I went back and forth whether this one should be green or blue. And I actually liked this trade today, so for that reason I made it blue. But you could argue it could easily be green. And of course we have the little channel working up there. You get a close outside, move to a new high, and you get a little higher high here, and then the bottom falls out. Unfortunately, you don't get a chance to trade this down. There's no setup there. And then you get your close outside here, and you actually get a second entry short here, but it's an inside bar. It's not a matching high. It is a pretty nice looking signal bar, but I think you got to skip that. And then a few minutes later, you get a lower high, but it's right in the, this is like in the middle. Look how flat the EMA is. Look at that sideways stuff. Sometimes these big bearish bars like this, I mean, it looks like in the end it would have worked. But you would have barely got your scalp, and then it's going the other way. And that's the reason you have to be afraid of these, because it's really hard to know on, you know, what prices are going to. Technically we should have went lower, but instead we go higher. So, and just when you're in the middle here, be very choosy. You know, you want to kind of wait for prices to get to the highs of a range and try to find a short, and then you want them to get work to the lows of the range and then try to find the long. It's right in the middle across here where it can get tricky if you don't have a trend that's working that you can play. So anyway, prices run up, you get a close outside, move to a new high, then you get a second leg up, and then suddenly you got a second entry short. Technically that's not a second entry short, but it's 2 legs to a new high, and really bearish bar, so I like going short just to get a chance to short this back into the range. And normally on a range like this, you're better off to wait on a lower high. And we don't really get one here because prices never break lower again until way down here, and that's too far down to call that a lower high. And you see what happens, it reverses on you. So a lower high would have happened just, you know, not far off that high. There's no reason to sell or buy there. So and it does end up bouncing, going higher. There is a second entry long there. Notice the new high, first entry, second entry, but we just came off the high, and we did come up short on the low, and so we're making higher highs and higher lows, but I just don't know that you want to go long right there. Again, it is a second entry. The problem is you got the little channel coming down, and that's the first close outside, and it just runs on up. Now, there are 2 legs up here now, and so on a bigger picture, look how far away we are from the EMA. I didn't mark this one. You could argue for that to be green. you're really better off to wait on a lower high, which comes here, and there's not much room there. That's the problem with that one. So I'd wait and see if if we push into the range and come back and test it and then get a short and we do it, it has actually a failure. And that's a perfect setup for a failure. And if you take that, you easily get a runner on this one, most likely. And the bottom just kind of falls out. Unfortunately, we didn't go all the way to the lows again, not in one move, but that's still a pretty nice move for today. And you get your first close outside. It still ends up moving and making a new low and going down and testing the lows. But look at this chopping sideways here. Just I don't see anything. You can't go long or high here. You're expecting prices to go lower, and nothing ever does until finally it just kind of drops on down here. But there's no, I mean, there are clues. Notice how we're making a lower high every time, and then we're making a lower low, lower high. So you would expect a lower low there. But this is really your signal bar, so you can't trade that. And look at that congestion. So I just don't like that one. And of course, it does drop on down, and then it bounces off the lows. And you can call that a triple test. There's a little bit of space in there. It's almost 2 hours in there between that, but it's still, we tested that level 3 times. So maybe you take that trade. I marked it green. That's where you would look for prices to bounce. So with a good signal bar, maybe you take that. And if you do take this one, it's another one that pays off because you get a good runner on it. Then it runs up here. You get a close. You got a little channel working up. You get a close outside, move to a new high, and lo and behold, you got a triple test there with a nice signal bar way away from the EMA, and this is played out. So I like that one. And you may or may not have got a runner on this one, depending on how you played it. But if you did catch a runner, this was a good one because it runs all the way back down to the lows again. Actually goes a little bit further before it even starts to think about bouncing. And so that was a nice little move there. And all we do is we find support a little bit lower, and we're just kind of bouncing around. There's really a range here. I didn't draw it, but there's really a range. Let's just go ahead and add it. And you can see there. And so I marked this trade right here. Notice what happens is you get a bunch of bounces here, and then you get this higher low back. You look how many times, 1, 2, 3 times you tested this. It's really the midline on this channel, but that's the original support line of the bigger channel. And testing it that many times it doesn't fail, it's probably going to push up even if it fails out the other side. So you might expect to get a scalp right there. I went back and forth about this one, but I liked it in real time. I really thought we'd take on off, but there's plenty of room to scalp out there. I think there's more than a couple points there. So if you took it, and then if you didn't take it, he might have thought about even going short, but it's right into the EMA there. But if it breaks lower right there, it's probably going to run down to the other side. So maybe you take that one too. I mean, it just depends on. It's really hard to flip back and forth from long to short to long to short. So generally, whichever way you're leaning towards, which I'm leaning towards long here because it's probably going to be a failed breakout, and you expect prices to go higher. So it's really hard to go short in there. And that's the reason, hey, why would you mark the long right into resistance almost, and then not even making note of the short? So but it's hard to flip flop back and forth. And here you're really thinking long. And we end up going long, but not before we made one more pass or run down to the lows again. And that's the concern anytime you go long into the resistance. But I like that trade in real time, so I went ahead and marked it green just in case somebody else saw it. I mean, again, I didn't really have this listed as a range, but you can clearly see the resistance there. I mean, it looks more like, to me, prices are trying to go lower and can't, so you would expect them to eventually bounce out of here and go higher. And so that's what I was looking at there on that higher low. This when it couldn't go lower there, and it closed, it tested that support once, twice, 3 times, and a couple of times it was trading way down here, and both times it closed higher back inside the range. So that's why I liked it. And of course, if you looked at this, you might have looked at this as a good chance to go short at the high of that range too. So this one was tempting as well, but the signal bar is just too neutral. Turns out to be the best move of all, but that's really probably because you how many times have you tested that across there now? One, this you really could call that two, three, four. That's like the fifth time. So the problem is just not a very good signal bar. So anyway, something to think about. But we bounce out of there, we go higher. You get a close outside, move to a new high, and it turns down. I don't think you want to go short yet. This was really a surprise to me here because we just got back in the range. And so, I mean, there's a good chance this bounces somewhere and gives you another, maybe there's a bigger channel here, but it doesn't turn out that way. This is a little spike and channel up. You get a break, move to a new high, and it turns down again. You might have traded that on an engulfing bar. I just think it's too dangerous. The bottom just falls out of it. I definitely wouldn't be going short down here or looking to buy unless you get a really good setup, a high or low or something like that. And you can see we're coming down. You finally get a close outside. Try to go lower once. You try to go lower twice. It fails and goes higher. I didn't look at that as a failure though. That's too congested. This looks like a little bit of a range here. So this to me is a double bottom. Looks like a double bottom. So you got a first entry and then a second entry, but there's also a hidden second entry in there. And I believe this broke lower and then turned up. I wouldn't swear to it. If it did, if it broke higher first, then I'd probably wait for it to close to trade it and see if you get a break above it. But if this broke lower and then turned up, maybe you go long one tick above that because you're probably going to trap some shorts either way. And the main thing is it's another bounce right off the trend line. And we're obviously trending higher here. So I like that one. If you catch that, it's a pretty good move. Runs all the way up. You can see it turns down right there. And we kind of work sideways before we end up dropping. And unfortunately, this is like a first entry, second entry, third entry. It's real tempting to want to go long here. We aren't quite back to the highs. Trend line's holding. You might treat it like a failed break out of this little area right here. I mean, you can clearly see there's some resistance or support and resistance in a little range going on there. So maybe you treat this like a breakout. There's a high or low here right off the trend line, and it's really back inside the low of the thing. I didn't mark it either, but that's a possibility. You could actually argue for that one. I'll mark it green. But what happens? We run up, we run back down, and we try to go higher again and come back yet again. And this is a triple test, and it's also a second entry long. The problem is that signal bar really worries me. You don't worry so much about a signal bar on a failure or if you get a failed second entry, which is what this is. But again, you got to be real careful. You don't really look for failures and second entries in a range because you can get chopped to pieces. And so there's a chance you could go long there and it turned down and just keep chopping sideways. So I marked it green. It is a triple test. You do have not only the range lows there, you've also got the trend line, and you can clearly see it continues to hold up through there. You could argue it's a second entry. You can argue it's a failed the triple test, second entry, all that stuff. So maybe you take that trade. I don't see anything else till we go into the FOMC stuff here. Right here we turn back down. It looks like we got a lower high. I don't think I trade that. I'd wait on a second entry. And you get a second entry here, but look at the congestion. Look how we're above the EMA. That's a perfect trap that sets up. So that's a failed second entry short. It's a second entry long, and it's right off the key entry point. I like going long there. You can see it. They got them trapped there. It runs up real fast, backs up probably have a lot of new shorts coming in there, and then they reverse it, and so they have to run out, and then finally you top out, and the bottom just falls out. You don't want to be trying to go short up here. We do have a break here and a couple of legs up. I didn't even measure them to see how close they were. Let's just see. I mean, it's basically a perfect, perfect measured move. So, but it looks a little congested. You do have this. I did draw a separate channel because it looked like we were at a break in a new high, and then we were moving lower. In the end, maybe this was the two legs up after the close outside. They are pretty much equal legs. So either way, it looks like we're probably going to go higher here if we break higher, and you can see it runs up real quick. And now we got a close outside, two measured legs up, and then we make two legs down and make a higher low here. This actually breaks lower, turns up. And so when it breaks higher, you are above the EMA there. Maybe there's a flatter channel here too that we're missing, something like that. I didn't even look for it, but it looks like there might be another trend line channel there. I just like that. If it breaks higher, it's probably going higher. And comes back here. It's not really a failure. It's a nice bounce, a nice signal bar. It is off the key entry point, but it's too congested there. You see, it struggles to go higher, but it does. Then you get a close outside, move to a new high, and then we're going lower again. This is one similar to this. You know, maybe you take it. I think you're better off to wait on the lower high, and that comes way down here, and you don't get a reversal, and it just keeps dropping down. There's another one off the key entry point, but it's a first entry. You got to be careful of those. Then you get your breakout side, move to a new low, and there weren't really any more trades here. Again, I don't think you trade that to the short side. And look at that move. It does break higher here and turn down, but you got to go short right into that double bottom. And I don't think that's anything you would really want to risk. And so I don't think you go short there. And finally you get a first entry and a second entry, but that bar is just not a very good bar. And it would have worked, but it does bounce quickly, and that takes us into really 2:30 with not anything else happening. So the afternoon was really, I mean, there's some good movement here. And again, there's a couple here you might argue for, but they're just not perfect setups, sure things that we want to try to take, and that makes it harder. So anyway, the volume does seem to be a little picked up a little bit, even in the overnight and the regular session. So maybe things are not going to slow down too much here. We'll see. We'll see where this market's going. So we'll come in and see what tomorrow brings. Let's just look again at the overnight. We're still dropping in the overnight. So, but you can't tell much about what tomorrow's going to be like at this point during the overnight right now. So we won't even try to do that. But things do look negative as I'm doing this video here. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.